Want to bring in Mike Benz now. Benz, look, man, we are looking at a lot that's going on. There's a lot that's being thrown at us. I've seen some of the stuff that you're putting out. Are they running? Have they fully activated the Color Revolution playbook?
Not yet. They're a lot weaker this time than last time around. Last time around, yes, they had a very robust network already in place ahead of Election Day that had already completed several of the Michael McFaul 7-step plans for how to overthrow a democratically elected government in a color revolution. And I can actually read some of those 7 points of the Michael McFaul playbook on this that I think are useful. 4, 5, 6, and 7, I think everyone should know to be able to identify what they may try should Trump win the Electoral College. Number 4 is an ability. So the first 3 are you need a semi-autocratic rather than a fully autocratic regime, meaning you need something of an open society to be able to set up your pawns on the chessboard to overthrow the government. The second is an unpopular political opponent who can be easily tarred or delegitimized. The third is a united and organized opposition. They're actually on these 3 points. They're considerably weaker than last time, in the sense that the incumbent government is actually their own. And their united and organized opposition is somewhat fragmented right now because of what appears to be a intra-party civil war between the Biden faction and the Harris faction. There appears to be some backbiting, and some of the groups are not as unified as they were in 2020. But here's where it gets interesting. Number 4 is an ability to quickly drive home the point that voting results were falsified, that the official vote tally that is reported on election night was wrong because of a parallel vote, a parallel tabulation done by so-called independent NGOs, which are all going to be essentially Democrat Party or Never Trump GOP third-party tabulators. Number 5 is enough blob media to inform citizens about the falsified vote. Technically says it's enough independent media, but that means independent from Trump alignment. It means their own captured media. So they need complete control of the media to be able to drive home the point that the official vote numbers were wrong. Number 6 is a political opposition capable of mobilizing tens of thousands or more demonstrators to protest the electoral fraud, meaning they need mass street protests, Summer of Love, George Floyd, BLM, Antifa-style street protests to run into the police precincts, to capture the parliament building, to capture the government buildings, to shut down the highways, to destabilize the country. And then number 7 is divisions within the regime's coercive forces, meaning a division within the guys with guns, making sure all the guys with guns are on the side of the protesters, or at least not willing to stand against them. And so what you see right here is a very different set of pieces on the chessboard than it was 4 years ago. When they did this wargaming in 2020, in June 2020, it was the week after the George Floyd riots had popped off. And so you had this CIA, DOD, State Department network teamed up with with both former heads of the political parties, Donna Brazile and Michael Steele, former heads of the DNC and RNC, all basically plotting to use Black Lives Matter street muscle as their forces. In fact, in their own playbook documents, which were published, I believe, in the Boston Herald or the Boston Globe, they specifically plotted to instrumentalize BLM as this revolutionary force to protest the official vote tally in the case of a clear Trump win, and even contemplated the need to run money to BLM so that they would be bribed enough to respond to a Biden call to take to the streets. Shortly after that, $200 billion flowed into the racial justice movement from the Chamber of Commerce companies, which were teamed up with the AFL-CIO in a secret agreement, as documented by Time magazine shortly after the 2020 election. So what they're doing right now is they have this new plot. It's called State Democracy Defenders. And as a part of State Democracy Defenders is this network that is spearheaded by Norm Eisen. A part of this State Democracy Defenders network is Jamie Raskin, as well as David Podhorzer, who is the main liaison to the AFL-CIO. So you have what they need is a legal predicate. Should there be a clear Trump victory on November 5th, then they need to set up this apparatus and have it take to the streets very, very quickly. They're going to need to say the official vote tally was wrong. They're going to need a legal predicate to hang on it. That's where Norm Eisen comes in. That delegitimizes the official vote tally. And they can use any number of predicates for this. They may argue there's voter suppression in certain states, so certain votes should be counted that weren't. They may argue foreign interference from Russia that can have some nullification effect on national security grounds, or they may take it all the way up to the 14th Amendment argument that Jamie Raskin called for, and that Sherilyn Ifill, the former head of the NAACP's legal apparatus, has set up a brand new center at Howard University, which is incidentally exactly where Kamala Harris will be election night, in order to make this sort of race-based Ku Klux Klan Act style January 6 argument, the same thing the Justice Department hit Trump with at the criminal end to justify nullifying a Trump Electoral College victory on January 6, 2025. And then the street muscle, I believe, would be coordinated with the David Podhorzer network around AFL-CIO, which has 2 million union workers who are aligned with the Democratic Party who will serve as the street muscle for this.
Well, and a lot of these guys, by the way, they've received those Biden bucks that went out in that. So part of the Green New Scam deal, the Inflation Reduction Act actually included Biden bucks that went out to a lot of groups like this. One of the ones that we're tracking in Pennsylvania is this Field and Media Corps, which really it's the same idea that they were doing with Acorn all those years ago. James O'Keefe exposed. We had them back in Pennsylvania in 2006. The same networks, where they're getting federal dollars to NGOs and nonprofits. And instead of it going to, of course, actually be used to just register voters, what they're doing is they're paying for registrations. They're putting in all sorts of fraudulent reg money. And we're seeing this in county after county in Pennsylvania. I know we've already filed issue, or I should say open investigation. There are DAs opening criminal investigations now in Lancaster County, in Monroe County. York County is taking a look at this. And I'm being told that Erie County is another one that they're seeing these fraudulent registrations come out. But the point is that the same pot of money is being used to flow into all of these various street networks that you're talking about. This is just what the money was being used to prep for the election, to get bad ballots into the system, to get dirty ballots in. Whereas what we're doing is and look, it's what it comes down to. The only way to overcome all of this, it's not going to be the courts. The way to overcome it is going to be having the numbers crashing down. We've got Bucks County we're holding in line today, Levittown, Quakertown, Doylestown, and then on Election Day itself, 5 November, your state of Pennsylvania, whatever state you're in, one of the swings, crash them at the polling box, at the ballot place, and then even if you're in a blue state or a solid red state, go out as well. Why? Let's win the popular vote. Let's get out there and do everything. Because, I mean, Benz, when it comes down to it, I'm just going to admit it to the break, but do you really think that any judge in America is going to overturn a presidential election?
It's actually quite interesting.
Other than Clarence Thomas.
Well, it's quite interesting. Maybe we can talk about this after the break, because Michael McFaul's in the same 7-step playbook that he document that he published, this blueprint for the State Department to overthrow governments, he specifically mentioned the strategy of putting coercive pressure on Supreme Court justices to have them make their deliberations under the presence of street riots, so that they are incentivized to actually take the extraordinary action of nullifying the vote. They gave an example in Georgia, for example, in the early 2000s, where it was a 2-month period between Election Day and the certification, and in that 2 months, they put together
hold it right there. I want to hear this. I want to hear the story. We've seen the threats to Supreme Court justices' homes. Mike Benz. So we are getting a little ahead of ourselves, but I want to talk about this because it's very important. So we had this huge case that came to, and we won this court case in Bucks County earlier this week. And how do we do it? We kept our OODA loop so tight. Our OODA loop was less than 24 hours. People have to understand what that means. Observe, orient, decide, act. So that is your operational loop, where you have identified a problem, you have oriented yourself to face that problem, you have decided how you will take action to correct the problem, and then you take the action itself. So OODA. So our OODA loop was, we identified Bucks County had issues. They still have issues, actually. We oriented ourselves to correct those issues. We made a decision working through the legal chain and the videos that we all put together, and then we took steps and took action. They weren't their cycle, because they didn't see us coming fast enough. The Democrats, the left, all of these street organizations, they didn't have anything out in the time it took us to get this in front of a judge, because we worked quickly and moved swiftly, that we were able to get an injunction in place and extend in-person early day voting 3 days in the aforementioned Bucks County. But you're saying that when they do have a bit of longer time, because we know there's going to be time between November 5th and then eventually January 6th and January 20th, any of these court cases, they're going to have time as well. That's when their networks can come into play, isn't it?
Yes, and they're very good at setting this up quickly, because this apparatus doing this at home, it's their professional job to do this abroad in order to overthrow foreign governments when the wrong person gets elected. And so, you know, the great example of this is what happened 20 years ago in Ukraine under the so-called Orange Revolution. This is one of the, color-coded revolutions of the State Department and the CIA. And what happened was the wrong guy won the election. And so the network activated in exactly that 2-month period between November election and January certification in Ukraine. And I'm going to read a little bit from Michael McFaul's Revolution Playbook here. And so the official results come in election day, and the State Department's enemy wins the election officially, according to the official vote count. So what they do is they descend a swarm of NGOs who say that actually the exit polling reflects disparities with the actual vote tally. We've done an independent parallel vote based on our proprietary methods, our academic methods, and we've decided actually the official vote tally is wrong. It should be the CIA-funded firms whose vote tally should count. So then they simultaneously launched a swarm of rent-a-riots to descend on the Parliament building, to descend on police precincts, to block the highways, and then it goes on to say the combination of systematically reported irregularities gave a few members of the Central Election Commission the courage to refuse to certify the final count, sending the issue to the Supreme Court. So again, they kick it up to the Supreme Court to decide who really won the election. And now this next sentence is sort of the coup de grace. The Supreme Court, deliberating amid the grand protests of late November and December 2004, then used the evidence of fraud that the NGOs had gathered as grounds for overturning the official results. So this is the point. And if you remember, there were rumors that Chief Justice Roberts had said to a clerk or to Clarence Thomas around last election cycle that they did not want to hear the election integrity lawsuits of the Trump suit because the country might burn to the ground with the riots if they sided with Trump. This is I don't know if that's true. I know that was reported, but there's been no direct evidence of that. But if that is true, that is literally exactly what the U.S. ambassador running the State Department, the ambassador to Russia under the Obama administration, said is what their plan is designed to do, to intimidate the Supreme Court to side with the rioters, and by activating these rioters essentially the moment the wrong guy wins the election. And I think they're not pulling this out early because currently the people in government are their own. If there's destabilization on the streets and the country burning down while Kamala Harris is still in the White House, then protesting the White House doesn't really make much sense. But that may change very quickly in the days after the vote. And to your point, that's why we need to run through the finish line. The bigger the mandate, the harder it is to pull this off on their side. The more Trump wins by, the harder it is for them to delegitimize a Trump win, which is why part of the TIP playbook, part of this playbook in 2020 was arguing that the Electoral College should be nullified and the popular vote should decide the winner. If Trump wins the popular vote, they can't use that. So, all these tactics, it's a sliding scale. The more you win by, the more legitimacy it costs them, the harder it is for them to pull it off, and the more it costs them in terms of legitimacy to activate this. The Trump faction does need to win by a too big to rig faction in order to stave this off.
And this is key. Look, I'm looking at early data numbers. I'm looking at early, turnout models, turnout projection. We've got some indication from the early votes. For people who think that this is going to be some blowout election, that's not what we're seeing. And that doesn't mean that. And so people get a little bit cocky. Benz, you and I were sitting next to each other at the Madison Square Garden rally. It was a great night. But remember that you still have to win the war. So you get motivated and you have a great time, and Patton gives the great speech, but then you still have to storm the beaches, and you still have to face the batteries, and you still have to face the machine guns and the turrets and everything else. And so that's it. And that's that. And those are the lines and the people waiting in line and all of the things. And then come the street stuff that happens afterwards. All of it. Get ready and buckle up.
The more you win the first battle by, the more favorable your position is for the second and third battles in this, which are going to play out over the course of November to January. So, to your point, if you haven't voted already, vote today. Vote early. Vote Monday. Do not wait until Tuesday to cast your vote. Stack the deck and tell your friends and family to do the same, because the more you win by on election night, the harder it is for this CIA coup, effectively, this Pentagon, State Department, never Trump, DNC, political insider, national security state apparatus to delegitimize the victory if the victory is huge. So it's not enough to win by a little. We have to win by a lot, which means you need to vote early, vote now, vote this afternoon. If you're hearing this and you haven't voted yet, go to your polling station immediately after this segment. You'll have a great weekend knowing that you've already done your part.
And it's as simple as that. And by the way, if you have done your part already, I'll say this as well, then your part becomes you're a motivator. So your part becomes your motivator and a force multiplier. So I was on War Room earlier and people were asking, can you bring people food? Can you bring lawn chairs, something? Of course you can. Of course you can. Now it becomes an issue. I will say this, legally speaking, and we've got to say this a couple of times. There's a couple of things you need to worry about. Number one, no political paraphernalia. No hats, no signs, no stickers, no shirts. Look, I get it. We love the MAGA hats. We love the shirts, all of it. Don't screw around. This is an operation. You are running the operation. You are actually running the counter operation to the regime's operations that Benz has been laying out here for years now at this point. This is our chance to actually beat this thing. So we got to do it. We got to do it right. Number one, no political paraphernalia. You put your hat on afterwards. That's fine. You tuck it under, close your coat, whatever you want to do. Number two, if you are planning to bring food, refreshments, anything like that, you can't do it through the campaign. You can't do it through the campaign. You can't do it through the party. You can only do it as a volunteer grassroots effort. And keep in mind, I know you're going to see the Democrats doing that. They're going to crack down on them the way they won't do on us. So you've got to do it as a volunteer effort. So if you're a Human Events listener, if you're War Room Posse, whatever, you're just a patriot and you want to go do something in your neighborhood, you can do so fine as long as it's done by yourself or, with a group of people from a volunteer perspective. So I know Trump Force 47 has a lot of great street teams that are built up, but you can't do it through Trump Force 47 because that becomes an electioneering issue. Same deal. All that stuff has to be left 10 minutes out. And Benz, talk to me a little bit just as we close out that why it is that we have to pay attention to the rules 10 times more than they do.
Well, because they control the Justice Department. And that's basically what it comes down to. This is the most corrupt Justice Department in United States history by so many orders of magnitude, it's not even close. The rules do not apply to them. The rules only apply to us. They set the rules. They enforce it selectively to make sure that they are above them. But the more they do that, now that we have X, now that we have Rumble, now that we have free speech again, in a relatively unfettered fashion, the harder it is for them to get away with it, or at least the harder it is for them to get away with that with their legitimacy intact. And so publicizing DOJ malfeasance on this is very important. Keeping the pressure up in terms of media reporting is extremely important, and it will remain important through January as they will try every trick in the legal book. But frankly, this is kind of the kind of final battle that this grand saga deserves. They've thrown everything at us. They've, from the Antifa hordes of 2017 to the mass censorship of 2018 to 2023 to the mass arrests to the lawfare to the dirty tricks around Russiagate to the impeachment. We're used to having the deck stacked against us. That is not something that I think will deter anyone who has been on this journey for this long. Frankly, it just makes us fight harder.
It's as simple as that. Mike Benz, where can we follow you, brother?
On X, at Mike Benz Cyber.